and hope you are all in excellent health. And I'd like to start with a brief introduction before I start the question and answers. Ishmael Khaldi is Israel's ambassador-elect to Eritrea and the first Bedouin diplomat to serve in his country's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Born in the village of Khalawed near Haifa in a family of 11 children, Ishmael earned a bachelor's degree in political science from the University of Haifa and a master's degree in political science and international relations from Tel Aviv University. He had positions in the Israeli Ministry of Defense, Israel Police, and in the Israel Defense Forces before working for the Foreign Ministry from 2004. He then served as Israeli consul in San Francisco and was a policy advisor to Minister of Foreign Affairs Avigdor Lieberman. He has advocated for Israel in the media, in churches and schools, and on university campuses, and considers himself both to be a proud Bedouin and also a proud Israeli citizen. He has written about his life in a short memoir, A Shepherd's Journey. So it is an honor that he is able to join us now. Excellency, or Ishi as you've asked me to call you, first of all, welcome. And it's really fantastic, as I say, that you're here and able to answer some questions. I will start initially, and then after a while, I will ask people who are listening to ask their own questions. So we'll sort of go in that order, if that's okay. Firstly, can you tell us a little bit about your life growing up, who you are, and perhaps a little bit about your family background? You'll need to unmute.
That's true.
Hi.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you. You're loud and clear.
Excellent. Shalom, everyone. Thank you, Jeremy. Thanks, Ellen, and Chag Sameach to everyone. Look, I'm very happy to be, doing this kind of conversation. I won't call it a lecture, because it gets me back to my memories, fond memories from my time in England, in London, and around the country. I think it was a very, a good experience. I learned a lot about the country there, about how people see Israel from there, especially in the community, Jewish community and outside the Jewish community. And above all, the work that we need to do in England and overseas. So let me just start with two things. First, I'm still in Israel. Last year, I was elected or appointed as ambassador to Eritrea and the African Horn, unofficially though. But I'm still here in Israel for technical reasons. I think the corona did its own part. Eritrea is still blocked, no flights, no commercial flights, no in, no out. It's a tragic thing, I guess, but that's the situation. The second thing is a little story. I want to, in the beginning of my career, I was assigned to San Francisco, and there's a story which happened just in the beginning, the first 3 weeks, I think. I went to speak in Berkeley for an interfaith community, and for about 80 people, from different faiths or different communities, Asians, Jewish, African American, Muslims, Christians, from all around, about the diverse society or the diversity here in Israel and how common, we both Israel and Northern California, the similarities we have. And after speaking about maybe 35 minutes, people started asking me questions, and then an 87 years old then, a lady stood up. We became very good friends, by the way. We are still friends. She got older, of course, and she stood and she was so excited and said, "Really, you are a Bedouin and a Muslim?" She added, this religious part, which I don't like, to be honest, but and you represent Israel? And I said, yes. And then she said, "Wow, that is fascinating." But that question, which surprised me, was when she said, "Well, tell us, but how come that you are here to advocate for Israel, about Israeli, equality and democracy, while back home among your brothers and sisters in your own village, you are not entitled to this kind of equality?" So, the second part of the question, by the way, I told her immediately, look, Israel is not a perfect country like other democracies, but, I think we have, we achieved as a country enough. But about myself, how come that a Bedouin in Israel could be a diplomat? That is not a surprise, because it is possible, that is a reality. And this question, by the way, repeated itself time after time in the 3 years almost I spent in San Francisco. if could be like a church or a community center or a Jewish synagogue, or even on a college campus, people were surprised by the fact that a non-Jew or a Bedouin could represent Israel or could be a diplomat in Israel. And the message to me was clear. People didn't know enough about the country, first of all. They knew or heard from what the media used to bring them. I'm not speaking, that was the day without, the social media we have today. That was probably the beginning of the Twitter, Facebook, and all of these, social media tools. But, online newspapers and, printed newspapers, and people, or from the media, from the news, from the TV, people read and heard, and that's all they knew. Among the Jewish community, people here and there, of course, came to Israel, and they knew a little, but when it comes to Bedouin, again, they hardly heard. And as Jeremy mentioned, the result was that I published a book called, it's a short memoir called The Shepherd's Journey. How a shepherd here born and raised in a little village in the Galil could be a diplomat. And the story, yes, that's the story. I will tell you shortly. I was born here in a little Bedouin village called Khawalid, northeast from Haifa, on the hills here northeast from Haifa. Third of 11 brothers and sisters. We lived in a tent until I was 8 years old. Then we moved to a wooden shack. We lived in a wooden shack, and with a metal roof. Then we moved to a concrete house later. And we didn't have our own school, of course, no running water, no electricity. And we had to walk about 3 kilometers from here to another Arab village for a school. And going back and forth, try to imagine in the summer and the heat of the summer, and in the winter when it's mud and rainy, and many times we didn't even go to school. So I finished elementary school. My parents, by the way, were like every Bedouin parent. My father worked in the kibbutz nearby, but then in an industrial factory here near Haifa. My mother was just a housekeeper. Her main mission was to raise us all up. And so that was the background. So we finished elementary school. Then I went to Haifa for high school, for the best high school to the Arab community in Israel, I remember. And I was the only Bedouin there. And I think that was the beginning where I started to feel that I'm different from the rest of the Arab community. Because, my family grew up here in the village near 3 kibbutzim. Our life center, what we call, is in Kiryat Ata. We go there to Kupat Cholim to work, do shopping, and we have great relations. And of course, the maybe stronger side is the military service. Many people from here served in the army. So we didn't know any, I would say, political agenda or a thought. And when I went to the high school, Arab high school, prestigious Arab high school in Haifa, and suddenly I met, people who came from the big, large Arab cities. People, by the way, came from the higher, I would say, class in the Arab community. Kids of lawyers and business people and doctors from the Arab community, and who were there. I think they were more aware politically and maybe nationally. So they came they started speaking about, being discriminated against, about, many, many things. And I'm coming, the poor Bedouin, from a little Bedouin village here, and I had nothing to do with these things. I do remember one time that during the, Yom HaZikaron, the Memorial Day, like the day before Yom HaAtzmaut for Israel, we had to stand as, a moment of a minute of silence. And I remember I stood. That was like natural or an instinct for me to stand. And I'm looking around. I'm the only one who is, standing. And of course, there was, I would say, bad experience for me then. People starting, saying all kind of words. So that was a really good. I think it's a good lesson, but also I would say a landmark in my life. After high school, I wanted to be, to volunteer in the military like my brothers. My parents said, no, go to school, university. We will do everything in order to help you. And I said, yes, but we are 11 kids. I don't want to be, a burden on your shoulders. Let me work and save the money. So I went to work in a kibbutz, convinced them, worked in a kibbutz nearby here for 6 months. And then another landmark, I met for the first time in my life, people who came from the Jewish community in New York. Yeah, Jewish kids in my age who came from, America, to learn about the kibbutz, about Israel, and we became friends. I brought them to the village, so that was kind of like my I would say thoughts started to change. That I can also go to America. I have friends in America right now. Just to make the story short, I made it all the way to the States. I survived there for 3 months. Then I came back here. I went to Haifa University. And then I joined the border police, and then for 2 years, and then another 2 years in the like civil police. Then later went to continue I continued my master's degree in international relations at Tel Aviv University. Then worked for the American Embassy in Tel Aviv, and then joined the Defense Ministry for some time. And then I decided to join the Foreign Service. To be a diplomat, you probably can imagine it's like a selection process. So you need to go through a written exam, then an oral exam, and then an interview, all kind of simulations in order to be accepted before starting the training. I tried it, I think 3 times, and finally was accepted. And the rest of the story Jeremy mentioned. Now look, I have to say one thing. Growing as a shepherd, it means a lot for me, and because you learn, believe it or not. I might sound cynical for some, but you learn to be a leader, not a leader like political leader, but how to manage things, how to run things, how to direct all kind of things. Because it's not just like we're going to work in a like industrial factory producing 500 cans of pickles or something like this. No, you are managing, different type of life. Because, my family had small, like the rest of the village here, a small, what do you call it, like a herd of flocks, right? Sheep and goats. And that's what we did. Again, running water we didn't have. We had, look, I'm telling you these stories you probably won't believe. But we used to have a little donkey or two. We would have to go. There is a tap near the orchard, which belongs to the kibbutzim, and we had to take plastic jerrycans, okay, plastic containers, just on the donkey, go down to the kibbutz orchard, fill with water, and bring back. Later, my father, of course, bought a car. Used to be a Jeep, the only car in the village, and things changed. We didn't have electricity, but we had TV. My parents had the only then, of course, TV in the village. That was a 14-inch black and white. I remember, the whole village would gather once a week or twice a week, like at my parents' place. And so we would watch all kind of programs from on TV. So look, that was, I think, poor life for many, but a happy life. People didn't complain. People had a little, and they were satisfied with what we have. But there was like close relations between each other, family members, cousins, brothers, sisters, because the whole village is one tribe. And, the thing is, if I am looking back at that, I would say journey, I think it is really challenging because, you had to get out of the whole, I would say box of the tribe where people care for each other, and you have to, in a sudden, disconnect yourself and leave and go. So that's it. I'll stop here, and then if any questions you have,
well, we've got I was going to say we've got another maybe 15 to 20 minutes to get through these questions, and we'll see what we can do. So many of us are familiar with the Bedouins of the Negev, but can you tell us something about the Bedouins of the Galilee Some of us here may be a bit less familiar.
That's true, Jeremy. Look, I think the Bedouins in the Galil are less heard of than the Bedouins in the Negev. Look, Bedouins are two communities in Israel. You have the Negev, about 200,000 people, and that's the large one. And then in the Galil, and we are part of them, about, I would say, 70,000, 65,000 probably, are living in 20 recognized communities or villages. There are small ones, 7 big ones, and then 13 small ones like us. Small ones could be 500 people till 3,000. That's small one, we consider it. And the large ones can be, I think, 7,000, 8,000 or something like that. The big, large ones have their own local council, local government, and that's the story. Look, I think the Bedouin in the community, the Bedouins in the Galil are considered as more organized, more settled, more educated, if you want. And I think that is for the credit of the interaction with the Jewish community around. Because, our story goes back, Bedouins in the Galil came to the area in the 19th century under the Ottoman regime. They came from different parts of the Middle East. My village came from what we know today, the southern part of Syria. There was no Syria, there was no nation state. It used to be Turkey, or the Ottoman regime, later the British or the French regime. So they came here looking to feed their animals. Because, the Galilee is green, it's not a desert. So they moved here, they were nomads. And this is who we are. The Bedouins are nomads, shepherd society, used to live in tents, raising again, flocks. So we came here and mainly located on the area between Haifa and Nazareth, all of these hills. And we lived under the Ottoman regime, then under the British regime, started in 1917 until 1948. And during the British mandate days, the first waves of Jewish, pioneers, right, Chalutzim, started to move here from East Europe mainly, especially after the horrors of the Holocaust. Yiddish speakers, I like to say, I'll tell you why. Now, just one thing before I continue, during the British mandate and the Ottoman regime didn't have good relations with us, because they tried to prevent the tribes from moving around, with the animals, with the sheep and goats and all of these things for many reasons. And then when the Jewish communities came here, led by some Zionist organizations, the relations between or close relations between Bedouin leaders or Bedouin heads of the tribes and leaders of the Jewish community started to be built then, okay, like close relations. And in a sudden we are finding ourselves in the same boat with people who could be our enemies, okay? We are Bedouins, we are in a part of the Arab culture. And on the other side, you have Jews led by Zionist organizations who came here. And those years are known and famous for clashes of Jewish communities with the Arab National Movement, Jewish communities with the British police. You probably know the history better than me. And as a result, Bedouins started to live close to the newborn, I would say, Jewish communities, mainly the kibbutzim, the agricultural settlements. And 80% of us, of the Bedouins today in the north, live, those of you who are familiar, close to a kibbutz as a result of those relations from 1930s, 40s. Close to us here, we have 3 kibbutzim. Ramat Yochanan was established in 1932, Kfar Maccabi 1936, and then Usha 1937. So we are just 2 kilometers from here. We have close relations with them. We work there. I think there's another dimension for this close relations, and that is, which by the way, led to close relations to the future, to be Jewish state, the state of Israel. And that was the military service. If you remember the Haganah was established in 1931. Then you have the Eitzel and the Lehi, 1940s. And Bedouins were recruited, okay, to serve in those pre-state military organizations. Some Bedouins served in the Haganah, Bedouins served in the Palmach, to protect the Jewish communities around here. You know, the Palmach, for instance, had one unit called Palhib, like a unit from one of the large Arab Bedouin tribes in the north, Al-Hib. Okay, so you know the whole the Bedouins started to settle down step by step. 1948, Israel was established. Leaders of the Jewish communities, or the Chalutzim, the pioneers, became leaders of the newborn Jewish state, Israel. Okay, and when it comes to the Bedouins, of course, they discussed the whole issue: what will happen with the Bedouins? What are we going to do with them? What will be their status? Remember, that was, I think, a gray area when after 1948, 1949, 1955, until the beginning of the 50s. And that his decision was to help the Bedouins settle down, okay? Help them do this transition from being nomad into becoming a more settled community and integrate them into the Israeli society. And of course, that was one thing. And when it comes to the military service, we can't put them under the compulsory service, but we will encourage their volunteerism until they solve, they settle down and they solve their economic issues, their social issues. Because remember, like a shepherd's, it's like this. It's a shepherd society of nomads. Can't become settled of high-tech engineers overnight. Okay. So these, things take it's a transition process which takes time. And I think from the beginning of the 50s, yes, until today, we have gone a long way. Okay, most Bedouins are settled down. More like settled down with living in organized, recognized communities, with the infrastructure, with running water, with electricity, with, of course, as you see, internet we have today. We have, schools, community centers. Look, we still have, different issues, other issues, but because, again, I'm saying that like many issues, I think the authorities didn't deal with, okay? And today we are, the younger generation, are trying to stand up and to speak up in order to solve those, those issues. So I think we have gone I think we are in the right direction. But like there are still issues or bumps along the road that we have to solve, and we are trying to. When it comes to military service, I think 1950s until today, look, it depends on the year. We are still not under the compulsory service. We are still on the voluntary base. I think the rate can change from year to year. Sometimes 70% of young people who finish high school. Sometimes it can be 60% or 50%, or sometimes can be 80%. Also, it depends on the tribe itself, on the community. There are some communities who have more, I would say, conservative values. They are stick to each other, they're close to each other. The whole issue of military service is not, look, I don't want to say like the Hasidim or the Jewish religious here, but they have their own reasons. In any case, that is the situation. Look, I think what's really I would say heartwarming is seeing young girls doing national service. Okay, like the Jewish religious girls who don't want to, who don't serve in the military, so they do 2 years national service or civil service. The same thing with Bedouins. I think that's also as part of the interactions that we had with Jewish communities around. And we know it is a possibility. I think in the last 15 years, you'd see the numbers are growing from year to year of Bedouin girls finishing high school, going to 1 year or 2 years, committing themselves for like a service in a hospital, or even in their own communities, in a kindergarten. My niece, for instance, did it in the police, in the legal department of the police. So I think things are changing. More and more, you would see more and more Bedouins going to college, going to university. At the most part, becoming teachers, because we need teachers to the community. Of course, we have engineers, lawyers. You have one diplomat. We have now 2 diplomats. Okay. But things are, I think, changing. So that's more or less, the situation. This is the whole issue of the Bedouins, and in the Galil, I'm saying.
Yeah.
We did just one thing we did. Look, we have never had, not in the north and not in the south, any kind of political representation. There are Bedouins who are ran in the Knesset, mainly in the Negev, but they ran within an existing party. Used to be the Labour in the past. Today, mostly the Arab national, like the Arab parties. But in the north, no. We had kind of a forum of the leaders of the Bedouin communities in the north. It's not like a strong. It's mainly to solve daily issues. It's not dealing with any kind of politics. But I think that is something that we need. That is something we have to and again, that is our responsibility, the younger generation, who you went to college, who went to university, and of course who served in the military or border police or national service, because we have a goal, and our goal is to help our community, develop our community and successfully integrate it into the state and its institutions. And of course, try to preserve the best of our own heritage. Look, more or less like the American natives in America, or the First Nations in the States, or the Aboriginals, maybe, those are tribal societies who try to become part of modern society while preserving the best of their heritage. So that's...
Thank you. Yeah, that's very interesting. And you've obviously covered a lot of issues there to do with the challenges faced by the Bedouin in Israel. And I think that will probably come up in later questions. I want to ask you this question though. Now, you've had a very interesting career in public diplomacy. Can you tell us just a little bit about that world? Maybe if there's one key highlight, and also what kind of hostility you've encountered and how you responded to that?
Well, that is a real question. That's a challenging question. Look, I have to say this. Being a diplomat or diplomacy, I think have an image of like cocktail parties, and it's prestigious things. But I don't think this is the situation for Israeli diplomats. Look, the Israeli diplomats, and that is not a secret, have really a challenging, I would say, life or a career. Being a diplomat in general is not an easy thing, really not an easy thing. It's not really the living in African countries, living in hardship posts, for instance. It's not really the best, thing. People are leaving their families, and moving from place to another. That's not an easy thing. Of course, for Israelis, for clear reasons, it's challenging. And being, I think, and I felt it, a non-Jewish, or I would say Bedouin, Muslim, if you want to make this distinction, Israeli diplomat, sometimes, believe me, it's not impossible. But, you do the best of your thing. You are, when I decided to be a diplomat, it wasn't, by the way, my dream. It wasn't like something I aspired from childhood. I do remember that when we went to school, we were asked, okay, what do you want to be when you are old? I said, okay, I want to be a farmer. Okay, close to my, being shepherd, and this is what I love. That's what I want to do. But you see, life took me totally different directions. I joined the Foreign Service in 2000, the beginning of the Intifada, later, 15 years ago, after two of my best friends, Bedouins, just like myself, were killed during their service in the border police. Okay, and I said, wait a second, I don't want people to hear about Bedouins, even in Israel, by the way, even Israelis living here, to hear about us only in those tragic incidents. We are part of the country. We have a history, as I mentioned before, we share the burdens, more or less, okay, where Bedouins served in the Haganah and the Palmach, building the country, and that is our story. And again, look, if I'm going back, I'll leave it. So now I have, of course, full responsibility and right to serve the country and represent the country. Now try to just remember, from the beginning of the Intifada, I went to visit a friend in the States, in America. Okay, that was 4 or 3 years before I joined the Foreign Service, and I wasn't really aware about what's happening for Israel's image around the world and all of these things. If you remember, again, the beginning of the Intifada started, I would say, a real, challenging campaign for Israel. And I remember I went to Pennsylvania, to Philadelphia, or near Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I was to visit friends, and they were not Jewish, by the way. They were like a Christian evangelist community, and they took me to their church. And they were so excited. They asked me if I can, speak about what's happening in Israel and of course, about the Bedouin community and everything. And I said, of course, why not? And then I did it. 5 days after, before I'm flying back here, they asked me if I can come to Chicago from the church and the Jewish community. Also, you want me to do the same, more or less, okay, to speak, because Israel then was, being accused of being, racist and and all of these accusations you probably know. And I said, of course. And then I took even a bus from New York all the way to Chicago. I think it took me 2 or 3 days or something. Not 2 days, maybe 20 hours. I went there, and then I came back here home to Israel, and I decided to be a diplomat. But I did it, I think, 3 or 4 times before joining officially the Foreign Service. So I'm very well, and I'm familiar with being a voice for Israel. And it's not an easy thing. Look, as a diplomat, you gain also lots of experiences, lots of, you see more, you experience more, you understand more. What people think, and where is, for instance, the ignorance. I mean, I think that our main responsibility here is to really map where are the challenges, where are the damages, of course, but also the dangers. Okay, if you see, for instance, people in one of the, in churches, for instance, start talking more and more negatively about Israel, and you will see it spreading, then you have to be aware, okay, and know that you have to find a solution for that. It's not just you are sitting there as a diplomat. No, you have to, your challenge. I mean, your goal is to understand the country you are serving in, to understand the challenges there, and understand where is that coming from in order to respond. And I'm telling you, I think that is the main thing. And again, I don't think that I'm the only one saying that. I think the vast majority of those voices are based on I would say ignorance. People don't know. People really just sometimes, I don't know, it can be a fashion. Maybe like if you look at the younger generation, or on college campuses, for instance, universities, I think like young people, like they like to do actions, as we say. Okay, they are looking for exciting things to do, and they work with each other. There are different kind of groups. One is about animal rights, one human rights, and one about all kind of things, and they merge together. And it's enough to bring one voice, a negative voice about Israel, who can, bring everybody else, and everybody else will come on board, and then, then we think, okay, well, here the whole campus is against anti-Israel, and I think these are the small things that we need. I think that our diplomats trying to do the best they can. They are working with like a different, what we call pro-Israel voices, or different organizations. And, I think it's lots of work have to be done. I think that, but, this is the way. Look, by the way, one more thing. I think that most of you have seen that. If you just Google my name and go to YouTube at Edinburgh. I went to speak about the University of Edinburgh about Israeli society here several years ago. And I was surprised there by a group of, I would say, pro-Palestinian group who would want, try to prevent me from talking. But imagine, guess what? There were different voices. Some even people came with like a freedom for Egypt. I mean, what do you have to do with Egypt? You are accusing me, the Bedouin Israeli diplomat, about freedom in Egypt. But groups who have almost no connection, okay? They merge together, they work together, they cooperate together, and this is what happens. And but look, there are also nice stories. I think maybe I'll stop with that. Or two stories. Look, one for instance, when I came to London, I came to London to establish or start a new position which didn't, existed until then, dealing mainly with or fighting BDS campaigns. And look, remember, you are a diplomat, and your position is also to create new connections, to create or establish new alliances if you want. That's not a secret. And I remember I also went to speak, I think, in Golders Green, Northern London, and also about Israel, about Israeli society, some political updates. And I remember that a lady, 55 years old, I think, more or less, she came and said, really, you are a Bedouin? I said, yes. And she said, look at yourself, you look like everybody else. And she was from the Jewish community. And I would always imagine that people, at least at the Jewish communities, would know about Israel more, okay? And they would know more, that we can do whatever the rest of the community can do. We are Israeli citizens. So these types of, stories surprise me. Another thing, for instance, what? Okay, I'll leave it here. I'll just leave it.
Well, I was going to say, you've painted a very vivid picture, and there are more questions I could ask, but we have been deluged. I literally mean we've been deluged with questions. So I suggest that we get through as many of those as we can, and I'm not sure how much time there'll be afterwards, but we'll see how we go. So
if you want, I am ready for the question if you want.
You're ready? Right, they're gonna come at you thick and fast. So
whatever.
Let's have a look. Where are we? I think so. If we go first to Dorian Havardi, I think was the very first one. If you could unmute yourself and ask a question.
Yes.
Are you there?
That's it. Hi there.
Yep, there you go.
Yeah. Have the Bedouins, the Bedouin sort of, your way of life has really sort of changed so much over the years. And I just wondered, have the Bedouins managed to maintain a strong community feeling despite all the changes in their lifestyle over the years?
Look, that's what I tried to mention before.
You did actually, you did address some of that question, yeah.
Look, yeah. I think, yes, I think especially today, and believe it or not, even the last year, the Corona, the whole situation of people, people, I think, I saw that a lot around here. People in a sudden, look, people who either were laid off from their work, or people who, they didn't go anywhere, mostly stayed at home, okay? And suddenly you would see them again trying to, how to say, to make alive again. I don't know what's the right word, okay? They're like things from their heritage, okay? They say, wait a second. I mean, in the past, we used to have, sheep and goats, have our milk and our meat and our eggs and everything. So people started flourishing again as being, living the traditional way. There's no doubt that there are things, and that doesn't cost them money. Okay, they have, they buy from here or from there, from the family, from community, and, farming things which they almost forgot. Or even making bread, in the past. There are many things, and suddenly you would see people here who have, building these little, traditional ovens. I don't know what you call it. They bake bread here at home. These things we grew up with. Okay, making even sweets, all kind of, like everything is home product. While until last year, I think, the last several decades, we were like on a downslope, moving from our heritage, going to the supermarkets for food, doing this. People became more busy and have less time. Things are, of course, are changing. And I think that we today, the younger generation, are also more aware about, the need to preserve the culture. One thing which we started here in the village, it's still like not an idea, but it's still kind of a project we are working on, to build a culture center. And culture center is not just a culture center for the Bedouins in the Galil, like a small building, which will do a few things. First, document the story of all of the Bedouin tribes here in the Galil. Okay, each tribe, what's their background, where did they came from, all kind of pictures, of course, if they have all of these things. It's a real project. And then document it here. Have like a short documentary movie about the Bedouins in the Galil and how their relations with the Jewish communities from the 1930s and 1940s. And then all of the government decisions about the Bedouins from 1948 until today. Everything like was mentioned about the Bedouins in the media, to have it here in kind of archive. All kind of publications, books written about the Bedouins. But more than this, also have, for instance, like summer camps, 2 weeks for the younger generation about their heritage, Bedouin heritage camp or something like this, So instead of going, for another, I'll call it a modern camp, like studying about computers, which is fine, or going to the beach or doing, these things, no, to go and, learn about their heritage, how their grandparents lived, and also about the values, hospitality, respect for each other, all the kind of things. I think it is very important. Believe it or not, earlier today, I took 6 of my nephews and nieces. I started, by the way, a program a few years ago called Hike and Learn with Bedouins in the Galil, here in the area, which, bringing people, mainly students from who come here, visit the area on 2 or 3 or 4 or even 5 hours. Some of them even would come here and stay on the footsteps of the Bedouins who came to the area in the 19th century. Where did they settle? How did they live? And how did they integrate into the Israeli society and the whole thing? So that's what I did today. I took the kids, like on a hike, and about 2 or 3 hours almost, to learn how their grandparents, lived, and their grandparents lived, and all of this. So I think it's very important. We are part of that place, and I hope I answered.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. Michelle Shane, is it Shane?
Yes, but it's not Michelle. I can't correct it. It's Michael.
Oh, my beg your pardon. Right. Okay.
No, it's you're correct. It's on the screen, but it's
right.
It can't become a Michelle, at least not yet. Yes, thank you very much. And really along a similar vein, I just wondered how the Arabic that you speak in your community might differ from, say, the Arabic of Arab people living around you. I mean, when you were at school with kids from more wealthy backgrounds, was your use of language, Arabic language, different in any way?
No, that's Michael. Thank you. This is a very good question. Absolutely, there's a difference. There's a big difference. We have our own. I think it's called guttural dialect, heavy dialect, Bedouins. And it's totally different from the rest of the community. sometimes even they would make fun of us, okay, about our dialect or about, accent. But absolutely, we have more different, it's not different language. I think it's different, different, I would say, dialect. Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Right, next, Lynn Lucas.
If you can unmute yourself, Lynn.
Yeah. Thank you very much for an absolutely fascinating talk. You're one of 11 children, and you obviously have very special parents because they really encouraged you to flourish, to educate yourself. They supported you. I just wondered about the rest of the children in your family. What about your brothers and sisters?
Yeah, look, unfortunately, not everybody had the chance to go to college, or university. We finished elementary school. Some of them continued to high school. Some of them not. Look, the girls, my parents maybe were also lucky that we are all, of course, and happy. They got married early, okay? They stayed at home and they helped my mother when they became 18 years old. One of them is 17 years old, 17 and a half years old. They got married, and so that's for the girls. But for the boys, same. They went to work. Okay, two were in the military. They did kind of not long time a career in the military. Other two, one became an electrician, and the other one became, he became like a little business, doing his little business until today. And I continued, my, what do you call it? I am, they call it, I think in Yiddish, wilde chaya, the wilde chaya, that's like, left everything and got far from the family.
Call you a trailblazer?
I don't know.
Thank you.
I see a moral responsibility, as I mentioned before, of course, to help the family. It's not that I, gained education only for myself. No, I, feel very strong connection here. I have to tell also, when I stayed in London 4 years, and then 6 months earlier, before I finished, I came back here. I decided to come back here just to be close to the family and, start a campaign to pave a road from the village to the kibbutzim. And I did. I think it was, many people heard about it. It was in the news all over. And we succeeded to pave a road, okay, which allows us to go to work, to medical care, and, from here to the kibbutzim. So.
Can I go to David Summers? David, can you pick one of the two questions, just so we can try and get through as many people as possible, David?
Thank you, Ambassador. If I can move from Israel to your posting in Eritrea, which you're conducting at a distance. The Horn of Africa is a very contentious area. All the countries there have got a lot of problems. What exactly is Israel's interest in this part of the world? Can you expand a bit about this? Thank you.
Look, I'm still, trying to, I say, watch from here, and of course, follow up almost 24 hours about what's happening there. Look, we have, a presence in Kenya, which is the southern part of the Horn. We have a presence in embassy, okay, in Ethiopia. But I think it's not, you can guess by yourself that our main goal is, our main interest or concern right now is what's happening on the Red Sea, okay? Only last week, the blockage of the ship, the freight ship on the Suez Canal, reminded us that what would happen if, for instance, Iran or the Houthis from Yemen tried to block, Bab el-Mandeb, for instance, the southern part of the Red Sea. So look, first of all, we want to make Israel is very clear. We want to make relations, diplomatic relations with every country. Okay, every country. Now we are in talk, of course, with Sudan on a process. It's ongoing. Of course, you heard about other countries in the Gulf, but also with every country, because that leads to economic cooperation and cooperation in many other fields. But again, when it comes to the African Horn, I think the challenges more are, I would say, security, defense, because it's really a boiling area. What's happening in northern Ethiopia right now with the Tigray, of course, you probably hear what's happening in Yemen, okay, in the last 6 years, since 2014, when the Houthis, decided to took over. Look, many things are happening. So we want to make Israel have like one goal, to protect its citizens and its national security. So we are there, to do everything in order to be in good relations with the countries around.
Okay, and Jeffrey Wolf, if you could unmute yourself.
Yes, very interesting talk. I don't know very little about the Bedouins, but do they practice a religion, or are they part of the Muslim community? Can you explain a bit about that?
Sure. Bedouins, are part of the Muslim community, okay? But the point here is that throughout the years, because Bedouins used to be nomads, okay? So they didn't build mosques, they didn't practice religion, okay? Instead, they developed what we call Bedouin norms, I would say, norms.
Yeah.
Which guided our life, or became our guidelines to our life behavior. Hospitality, as I said, not just open your home for me or your house for me and feed me. No, it's also mutual respect for others. Conservative family values. Commitment for family values, of course, respect for elders, all these things, I think we became more important that, religious belief, okay, than becoming like a religious or practicing religion. Now, again, the fact that they didn't, they used to move, didn't build mosques, okay? But I think that in the last 30 years or 40 years here in Israel, especially in the north, in the south, you'd notice more and more, religious activity there. They have more mosques. The Muslim Brotherhood or movement, the Muslim movement here in Israel, okay, are very active there. That is, and every community, of course, have its own mosque. Look, I want to say one thing, and I don't think this is a political statement or, criticism or something like this. Look, there's something here wrong happening, I think. Look, again, I'm saying my own personal opinion that the country, not subsidized, but the country support financially the building of a mosque or a church or a synagogue. I think that is wrong. I think there must be a separation between the religion and, of course, state. If a community wants to establish a mosque or a synagogue or a church, I think the community themselves have to do it on their own. I think the country should step out of these things.
Well, interestingly, in Germany, there was part of the taxes were paid to have the religions, and the Jewish before Nazism, the Jewish community in Germany was subsidized to a certain extent by the state taxes.
Look, the religious institutions here, like educational institutions and cultural institutions, they get the land for free to build their facility, okay? they get, I think, exemption from taxes. Okay, these things does exist, but why would the country, you know, come help the community to establish the building itself? Look, I think in my eyes, I think it's wrong, but you know, that's only my opinion.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for your answer. Right, Eve Swabe is next. If you could unmute yourself.
Right, I was wanting to ask you, Your Excellency, what is relations like between the Druze and the Bedouin communities? I know obviously you serve in the border force together, but I was thinking more generally.
Look, we are different communities, I have to say. You know, they have their own like faith, their own, you know, society, you know, different, I would say, lifestyle than us. I think our life is more challenging. I mean, they are more settled, organized, educated, and really well established, while we are not that situation. So that is a big difference. I mean, you'd see the higher numbers of educated people in Druze community than the Bedouin community. Okay, but I do think that when it comes to Israel, okay, when it comes to Israel, you know, they serve in the military under compulsory service. So the 18 years old, they have to serve, while the Bedouins still not. And that has also its influence. I think that, you know, again, I say challenging. I mean, we face lots of, you know, issues today that you know, they don't. Of course, when it comes to you know, their relations to the state, our relations, we have the same relations for different reasons, probably. Okay, because I said before in the beginning that, you know, the way our relations were designed, okay, designed to the state and its national institutions, happened differently from the Druze community. You would see more Druze as representatives in the Knesset and in government institutions, way higher than the presence of the Bedouin community. And of course, that helps. That helps solve, you know, problems. That helps solve, I mean, like, you know, in legislations, that helps in, you know, government, I would say, finance to the community. When there is a presence of Druze representation in the Knesset or in the government offices, things, you know, the community have, like I would say, easier life maybe, okay? They have, you know, they solve their issues easily.
Thank you very much.
No.
Okay. Now, penultimate question. David Gould has a nice challenging question. David.
The government of Eritrea has a very bad reputation in the field of human rights, probably the worst in Africa. How will this affect the way you do your job? Is it that, should an ambassador be undiplomatic and criticize the government?
You know, I spoke earlier today with the American, he's not an ambassador, but he's in charge of affairs at the embassy there, because they don't, since 2009, the Americans don't have an ambassador there for political reasons. And I told him, I mean, what's happening there? He told me, I don't know. I mean, he was so really frustrated because he's there, been there. I think he's finishing soon. Look, it's a really tough place. It's not an easy. It's really tough. When I say tough, it is really, really tough. I mean, the regime there is very strict, and you know, they don't like any kind of criticism. That's why they are almost isolated from, you know, the Western world. See what's happening in the European Union. European Union in some stages cut, you know, kind of, you know, finance assistance for Eritrea, only because of those things. Lots of criticism about, you know, companies who are invested in Eritrea, because they hire people who are recruited by military, like a military or a national service in Eritrea. Okay. One of them is Agrico, if you know this company in England. It's a British company dealing like with the mining. It's invested. I think it was a discussion in the parliament in London last week, okay, about Eritrea and the situation in Eritrea. Look, again, you know, serving in Asmara is not serving in London. Serving in Asmara is not serving even in Addis Ababa. I mean, everything is blocked and everything is watched and everything. It's a challenge. It's a challenge. But again, I mean, you have to find your way. I mean, don't criticize them. If you want to criticize them, you will find yourself out quickly.
Thank you. And regrettably, the next question, I'm afraid, will have to be the last. Jack Green, please. Jack, if you're there, you'll need to unmute yourself. Jack, you'll need to unmute yourself.
Let's see if he's still there.
We can't hear you, Jack.
I think you're going to have
Right, I may have to read the question out. Yeah, because okay. He's basically asked you, he said, your experience in Edinburgh in 2011 must have been awful for you. During the years that you spent in London, did your reception at other schools and universities improve?
Look, if it improved, I don't know. I mean, the hostility didn't change. I think the hostility is there and it's always there, especially for you as a diplomat, representative, official representative. But I think during my years in London, 4 years, what I did, as I said before, I learned how to, you know, bypass those, you know, criticism, okay, by building relations, okay, by academic, you know, figures, professors for Middle East or student unions, or, you know, that's the way. But to say that it changed, it didn't change. I think the hostility is still there. But of course, we could appear more in universities. And again, that is by building, you know, that is by building new relations with, again, with the university institutions. And that is something that we had to do more. That is something that we need to focus on more.
right. Thank you very much, Jeremy, and thank you very much, Your Excellency. I think time is pressing on and we're going to have to call this to a close. May I thank you sincerely for giving up your valuable time and coming to talk to us. I personally have learned a lot. I have to express my ignorance. I didn't know much about the Bedouin community. I have to tell you that we all take pride in your achievements. The fact that you have been presented with opportunities, you have taken those opportunities, and you are now representing Israel in the wider world. Really, to see what you've done gives the lie to the fact that people think that Israel is an apartheid state. We wish you well. We hope that the coronavirus epidemic hitting the world will be finishing very soon and you'll be able to take your post in Eritrea. I would like to thank you on behalf of us all. I would like to thank all those who have switched on and are listening this afternoon. And may I say that I wish you all well and good Yom Tov for the rest of Pesach. Thank you, Jeremy, for conducting the interview so well. And if you'd all like to join me in thanking His Excellency for giving of his valuable time. Thank you very much indeed.